Hey, welcome back to Full Time with Meg Linehan. I am Tamerra Griffin, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Meg Linehan. Meg, there's so much going on, but I have to quickly check in. How are you doing?
Wait, I enjoyed the intro today. Hey, it's mid-January. We have an NWSL schedule. I'm free from that, but otherwise I've been kind of consumed by Naomi Girma and jealousy that our producer Theo has more snow on the ground in Texas than we do, at least in town here in Vermont. Not right.
I mean, the people in the Southeast have been having a ball with the snow. I have been getting so many videos on WhatsApp of people acting like local news, saying their name, the date, what's going on, like we can't tell. It's been bringing me a lot of joy here in sunny California. All right, before we even start talking about Naomi Girma, who is happier in the world right now than Chelsea fans, East Africans, defenders? We are going to be also doing on the show today a deep dive into the post-draft era. We have conversations with recent NCAA graduates, agents, general managers about how they've each been navigating this post-draft era ever since the NWSL announced last year that they were going to eliminate it. But back to Naomi. Meg, where are we at in this? Because there's been a lot of reporting, a lot of sources being cited. Where are we at right now when it comes to Naomi's transfer from the San Diego Wave to Chelsea?
Right now, we're still waiting for it to be finalized. Chelsea and San Diego Wave have agreed to terms over the transfer fee. So that's $1.1 million. So that was my reporting from earlier this week, that Chelsea have kind of won this 2-horse race. Like the previous reporting I had done was around Lyon hitting that $1 million number for a potential transfer fee. And those were really the last two teams in it to win it. Arsenal had fallen away by that point. But now we know Chelsea is the apparent destination, just needs to get across the line. Medical, formal announcement, all of that fun stuff. So there's still some things. We also don't know what the terms of her contract at Chelsea are going to be. So there's still some reporting to do. There's still some news, and obviously the big pomp and circumstance around her actual announcement.
I'm already thinking of how social media is going to explode with the where were you when the signature was when the ink on the signature dried, because it really does feel like we're living through a massively historic moment. And in order to just really lean into that and get as many perspectives as we can, who better to bring into this conversation than the Athletic's women's soccer writer and Manchester writer, Charlotte Harpur. Charlotte, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks. No snow here, just Mancunian drizzle.
Mancunian. Love that. Feels like such an exotic word on this show. All right, Charlotte, can you give us some sense across the pond of how the women's soccer world and the Women's Super League is receiving this news that Naomi is going to be coming over to the WSL and specifically to Chelsea?
I think it's a huge coup for Chelsea after Meg's reporting when Lyon were kind of in the bidding process, and especially how Chelsea have really put their money where their mouth is. They did this last year when Sam Kerr suffered an ACL injury, and straight away it was Mera Ramirez from Levante who had a huge impact. It's a similar scenario here. Chelsea aren't, just splashing the cash for the sake of it. Kadisha Buchanan is injured. They need cover. They have Natalie Bjorn and Millie Bright, but Natalie Bjorn was brought in to cover for Millie Bright when she was injured. So there is method to, not a mad figure, but a world record fee. And Sonia Bonpastor wants to win titles. And Naomi Girma, they feel, is the best player to help them do that. So in terms of fan reaction, it's like, bam, we got the best defender in the world in England. If, as Meg reported, all goes to plan.
Yes, right. Of course. We always have to put the disclaimer on until we're actually across the line. Things can change. You never know. This is kind of, I don't know if people fully understand the joy and terror of reporting on transfers, but it's not the most pleasant process. I will just put it that way.
It's the kind of the slight sink in your stomach, just like, oh, as it goes out.
Yeah, I mean, it is just, I feel like I have a pretty good success rate career-wise, but there is always, I think the approaches to how these things get reported are very different in America and the UK. And so I think I'm a little more used to dealing with folks over here. And then when it does involve England, it is, or France, a very different kind of approach to when you're bringing information to people and being like, so would you like to fill me in on what you're thinking here? And then they're just like, no. Well, let's move on to Manchester. Charlotte, at the derby this weekend, where should we be thinking Manchester City is right at the moment? Obviously, Manchester United getting that big result, but let's focus on City for a minute, because NWSL fans are also going to be very keenly attuned to this with the announcement of Caroline going to Manchester City. So let's set the scene a little bit here.
City are struggling. They have 3 huge injuries to 3 of their biggest players. Captain Alex Greenwood, who is the key to their build-up play. Bunny Shaw, league and club top goal scorer, who is just, has that predatory instinct in the box. And Lauren Hemp, probably for kind of US fans, known for her just terrorising defence, running at the back line for England and for Manchester City. So those are 3 huge blows. Gareth Taylor said yesterday that Bunny Shaw's due to be back at the weekend, but Alex Greenwood and Lauren Hemp is further down the line. And so, but that's just skills on the pitch, but off the pitch they are massive characters and massive leaders as well. So then to lose the Manchester derby in their backyard, which they have never done before, was another blow. Gareth Taylor said they're trying to recruit to give that a little bit of boost and support to have more depth to their squad, especially as this is the first year for a long time that Manchester City are in the Champions League as well. So City are not in a good place.
I watched the game. I do support City, and it was rough. It was rough. I think to your point, Charlotte, about the personalities, specifically, I think in that game, Alex Greenwood's presence was sorely missed. Every time City tried to play out of the back, it was a nightmare, and yet they kept trying to do it. So certainly things are in a very precarious position for City. For United, though, it sort of seemed like a statement or a stamp on the sort of upward swing that they've been having. Would you agree with that?
I think United haven't dominated in terms of possession or entries into the box or attacking third. Their star player has been Fallon Tallis-Joyce in goal. She's been a standout player for United defensively and really consolidated that back line. United are in a different phase compared to when Mary Earps, Katie Zellum, Lucia Garcia were there last year. They're going for a kind of young, hungrier recruitment drive. So the underlying numbers don't suggest that Manchester United are thriving, but this is a kind of momentum point, is what Mark Skinner described it as that it's a huge win for them against City. Only the second time that they've ever beaten them in 10 Manchester WSL derbies. And as you said, their pressing was key. That has been their best statistic. They are one of the best pressing teams alongside Manchester City. So it's one win. Can you consolidate that now in the league? Now that you're third, now that you've jumped up above City, level on points with Arsenal, like Champions League qualification would be really, really good for them at the end of the season. I don't think they're going to challenge for the title. They're way off that.
All right, let's talk about the title before we let you out of here, because you brought up Arsenal playing against Chelsea. Like, is this Chelsea's title already? I mean, like, we've obviously seen kind of this continued success from the Blues over the past, honestly, decade, but is there any team capable of catching them right now?
Right now, I'd say no. They're 7 points clear. They're stable. They look like they've got a solid squad. They have a manager that has been there and done it and got experience in terms of Champions League. Okay, the WSL is different. But even their display at the weekend, like some of those goals and the combinations, Kat Macario, it looked really slick and really polished. Arsenal have their interim manager Rene Schlegers has now been made permanent, so that adds stability. But what happens when the pressure is really on Arsenal? What happens when results don't go their way? They have definitely seen an upturn since Jonas Eidevall's departure, a happier camp, Alessia Russo full of confidence. So, there's no saying that Arsenal can't close the gap. And if they beat Chelsea at the weekend, then that deficit, is only reduced to 4 points. But if you're looking at on paper and the squad depth, then you just think Chelsea are going to be title winners again. Of course, as Manchester City have just experienced, you've got League Cup, you've got Champions League, you've got WSL. This is when it becomes a real busy part of the season. A couple of injuries and that can change everything. But at the moment, Chelsea are in the driving seat.
Well, with Naomi Girma's reported transfer happening potentially soon, it will be interesting to see if she brings over any NWSL chaos into the WSL that we may or may not experience at the end of that season. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we're going to have to keep inviting you onto the show now that our worlds are drawing closer together. But it's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, Meg, last thing to discuss in this opening segment of the show. The NWSL schedule is out, and for me, and I think you and most people, the headline update is that Decision Day is back. I feel like we manifested this, right?
I feel like everybody manifested this. I feel like everybody was like so deeply sad that the first time we got Decision Day and like actually worked, and you had that whole drama around Gotham making it into the playoffs and then going on a championship run to then immediately lose it was just, I understand why we all felt so betrayed, but to have it come back, for the NWSL to like bring their media partners along and say like, this is actually worth it. We promise. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. It's, a 3 or 5 p.m. time slot, whatever it is, but it's going to be so worth it. Good job, NWSL, giving the people what they want.
100%. The chaos we deserve. If you want more details about the NWSL schedule, the Athletics staff writer Melanie Nzide has an article on it at The Athletic. Please go check it out. All right, before we take a break, as a trusted listener of Full Time, I want to make sure that we are doing all the things on social, thanks to our brilliant video producer, Leah Griffin. So make sure that you're following us on Instagram and TikTok, as long as TikTok is around, at TA Full Time. We have videos, interviews, some things that we're not even discussing on the show, so extra content. Who doesn't love that? Make sure that you're with us on all the platforms. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're diving deep into NWSL free agency.
All right, welcome back. We are living in a post-draft NWSL world now. Preseasons are underway. We're getting these preseason rosters, and the college signings are coming in. And first off, we are joined by 2 brand new NWSL rookies, both out of UCLA, Lilly Reale of Gotham FC and Quincy McMahon of the San Diego Wave. All right, Lilly, let's start with you just because, it's a new group of folks coming in the NWSL. Can you tell us something that people need to know about Quincy?
Yeah, obviously playing these past 4 years with Quincy has been nothing short of a dream. She's an awesome person to be around. I think the one word that comes to mind for me is competitor. She's one of the fiercest competitors I know and has saved me in many games. So I feel very grateful to have her and just to have learned from her these past 4 years.
All right, Quincy, your turn. What's one thing people need to know about Lilly?
I think one thing that people need to know about Lilly, which I think a lot of people already do know, is that she's very funny and very much someone that's easy for people to get along with. So I think, like how Lilly said, Lilly was also my roommate for 2 years, and just being able to kind of spend every day with her. She is very much someone who is very competitive in soccer, but very balanced in her everyday life. So as much as she's fun to watch, she's also fun to hang out with.
Okay, good to know. All right. Well, first of all, welcome to the NWSL. Welcome to the madness. And I want to start with this idea of, I mean, both of you are part of this class of people coming into the league that we would usually expect out of a draft class. So, Quincy, maybe you can start us off. What was your reaction when you heard, okay, the NWSL draft is going away, that mechanism that everybody kind of expected to still be happening, now gone?
Yeah, I think my initial reaction was excitement. I think it's super exciting to be able just to have the autonomy to choose and just to kind of honestly really advocate for yourself was really what I felt like this new CBA was allowing us to do. I think another emotion that does get brought up a little bit is uncertainty, just because with the draft, there was kind of some finality with it. Like it was like, okay, you just have to wait till this day and then you'll know X, Y, and Z. And I think when we were looking at the start of the season and thinking about not having a draft, it was a little bit like, okay, when are things going to happen? What should I be looking out for? But yeah, I think those are the two biggest emotions I had.
Yeah, Lily, I know that you've talked previously about wanting to play all 4 years of college, right? So, like, I think there was a sense for you of, I want to go through the draft. So what was your reaction when, okay, this whole idea of how you're going to enter the league changes on you?
Yeah, I think Quincy kind of said it best, but I think there also, was that confusion around it of just not knowing how, that process works and how you were going to really be able to talk to teams, figure out, not get stuck behind, stuff like that. So, but I think with that also comes a bit of relief because, as Quincy said, you have a bit more control, which is very exciting for players. Um, I think in past years, this league has, sometimes hasn't done the best job with giving these players free agency or the ability to really control their future. So I think I'm just grateful that we're a part of this class now that really got to figure out what team was going to be the best for them personally or developmentally. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, Lily, I think let's jump off of that because I think there is something really special about this year. I mean, obviously the new CBA, free agency, all of these things, but you are part of essentially kind of a historic class of folks coming into the league. I mean, do you think about that? Was that ever part of, in the back of your brain as you're going through this process of, okay, I am doing something new and different?
Yeah. I think definitely just understanding, having this control is rare and it's so new. I'm just extremely grateful for, the players who have fought for us before and just understanding the impact and the how that's affected us and the outcome that it's had on us to now be able to come in and have, a lot of control over where you end up and where your future takes you. So I think just understanding how that's impacted me has definitely been something that goes through my mind throughout this process. And like I said, I'm just very grateful to be a part of the chaos and a little bit of the confusion that comes with this new process. But I think Quincy can agree with me. This has been an awesome process for the both of us. And I'm just excited to see how, the environments that we've picked for ourselves impacts our future in positive ways. So,
yeah, Quincy, jumping off of that, I mean, obviously both of you are coming out of UCLA, which is a pretty storied program in its own right. There are other players who have obviously gone on to the NWSL, multiple, but I mean, Quincy, when you're thinking about, okay, is the NWSL the right league for me? I mean, how much, I guess, deep diving are you doing on the league? How familiar are you watching the NWSL? Like, what is the vibe like for college kids coming into this league right now?
Yeah, I think it varies from person to person for sure. I think me and Lily and all the girls at UCLA had a really cool opportunity to watch a lot of our friends, especially in the last couple of years. So I know since I got to college, the visibility has gone up so much. Like before, I remember over COVID, I could only watch the games on Twitch. And like that just wasn't, and it would take you 20 minutes to find the game. You couldn't even get the good video quality. Like that wasn't really sustainable. And I didn't feel like I watched a lot of NWSL in that way at all. But ever since we have gotten to college, I mean, the visibility has gone, just has increased so much more. And even from 8 teams to 14 teams, like there's so many more girls who are playing and so many more girls that now we know. So I think going in, like my junior and senior year, definitely just watching a lot of different clubs and just kind of getting a feel for them too, and just getting a feel for their culture was really cool.
All right, let's get into this process then, because obviously, okay, so you're watching NWSL a little bit more. You have some teammates that have come out of this program that are in the league. I mean, Quincy, let's go back to you again. Like, who are you talking to as this process starts to start? Like, how are you thinking, okay, I've got to figure out what team I want to be on now, rather than maybe like having that choice taken out of your hands?
Yeah, one thing that was helpful was we had gotten the opportunity, a couple of us, to go and train with different teams over summer, over winter breaks. So I'd gone to a number of different places, I'd say 4 different places before even my senior year. And that was really cool, just kind of to see how different each place was, and also just like what they are kind of bringing to the table before I even knew that I would be able to choose a place. And then once we kind of got the message, okay, we're going to be able to have more autonomy in this, like then it kind of got into more individual conversations. I was personally someone who, and I think Lilly was the same, we had talked about this, but who really couldn't really think of that stuff during our senior season, just because I'm very much an overthinker. So if I just would have like completely, that would have taken over. So I think for both of us, we kind of just had that in the back of our mind, but it really wasn't something that we talked a lot about or were really making moves for. I mean, we knew teams were interested just based on like, okay, you had got invited to train with them over X, Y, and Z summer. And I think when it really picked up was just like after that last game and after we were done, coaches could call you individually. They could talk to your coaches. So, and then we both share an agent at Wasserman, or we have the agency group at Wasserman that me and Lily are both with, and they have just been tremendous help. So it was honestly kind of like college recruiting all over again. But yeah.
Lily, how has the process gone for you?
Yeah, I think like Q said, it's rare that you have, 10 plus teammates or really just friends in the league that you can rely on and just ask questions about, pick their brain, understand, their team's culture through them, or as Quincy said, just training over the summer was an awesome experience, understanding, where you fit in the professional environment, or which environment fits best for you, stuff like that. So I think just all those opportunities kind of collectively made this process a lot easier for us. And I can really only imagine that it will continue to hopefully be that way, with a lot of players being able to have the opportunity to come in over summer and try out different teams, just figure out, personally and developmentally wise, which was going to work for them. But going back to your question, I think just understanding the league through my friends and teammates' perspectives was definitely a big help in this process for me. It's funny, I talked to a lot of them, and they really do have one thing to say, all in common. I talked to about 10 different girls that were rookies last year, and they were all just saying, your rookie year is a bit of chaos no matter where you end up. Just trying to find your feet in the league, get used to your new environment, get used to the team, the coaches. So whether you pick the best environment for you or, you're not really sure where you're going to end up, it's all just chaos anyway. So you really just find yourself throughout the year. I just thought that was funny though.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've talked to a lot of, kids coming out of the draft, right? And I think there is this sense of in college, there is maybe a little more structure. And I think that's valid for anyone moving from college to real life where, you're not in a dorm or you're not at a university housing of some kind. And there's no like meals that are kind of readily accessible for you all the time. And so adjusting to that, I mean, what part of, I guess, this next shift into pro life are you really looking forward to? Quincy, if you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I think a big piece for me would just be like kind of an exploring a new place. UCLA brought like so many amazing things, but we were there for 4 years. So I think it's exciting to kind of be in a new space and like find a new favorite coffee shop and do all those things. I think another big thing that will, how kind of you said and Lily said, like will be tested and will I have to grow in, is my professionalism. I mean, I think in college you get kind of a lot of hand holding, like a lot of people checking up on you, even your friends and your teammates. And I think more in the professional environment, it's kind of up to you. So I think growing in that way for sure.
Lily, anything to add?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to have to learn how to cook a little bit more for sure. I think I was very fortunate. UCLA had some of the best dining. And then as Quincy mentioned, we would explore a bunch of college or coffee shops. So I think for me, I'm going to have to, figure out how to cook some of my own meals and stuff like that. But I am looking forward to just growing, I think, on my own as a person and as a player. Having a lot of alone time, I think, will be challenging for me. So I'm really excited to, just like get to be friends with and grow into the environment, figure out different places to go around the area. Being on the East Coast will definitely be fun, I think, for me again. But being in LA for so long, I think I'm going to have to relearn how to adjust to the cold. So that will definitely be another thing. But yeah, as I said, I think just learning how to be a professional and live on my own will also be something that will be a bit of a challenge. So I'm excited.
Yeah, Lily, I hate to tell you, I've been to some cold, cold games at Red
Yeah.
Bull Arena. I mean, there is
Yeah.
like an infamous She Believes Cup game. It was Rose Lavelle's debut. I think it was like -4 with the wind chill. And to be fair, like the season starts slightly later than when those games are happening. But,
Yes.
East Coast living, it's a little different. Let's maybe dig into why you actually ended up with Gotham. Like, what was it about what Gotham is trying to build that decided, this is the place for you?
Yeah, I think as we mentioned before, I was able to train with a bunch of teams, Angel City being one of them, just because of convenience and having a pretty good relationship with that team. I think understanding, where I fit in the professional world was awesome throughout my 3 years I spent there, these past 3 summers. So finding a footing and just understanding what they have to offer. But also, I think for me, I knew I really wanted to get back to the East Coast at some point. UCLA was such an awesome experience. And I think it really taught me so much about who I am and, just interacting with people who are a lot different than me. There is a different culture out there, and I was so grateful to be a part of it. But I think I did want to find myself back on the East Coast at some point, whether that be this year, which fortunately it is, or eventually. But yeah, I was able to train with Gotham this past summer. And yeah, I really had nothing but good things to say about the coaches. The GM, Yael, was awesome to talk to. And just, knowing her role and her process as a player, it's cool to just see someone who, has been through what I'm going through right now and understanding her perspective and just her guidance. So that was awesome. And then I think just understanding the players and getting to interact with a lot of them this summer was super exciting. Pick their brains, as I mentioned. And I think just personally and developmentally, as I've mentioned, I think Gotham was the best fit for me for a lot of reasons. And I'm really excited to get to a club like that that's had so much success and players who have just developed tremendously throughout their time there. So I'm excited.
Yeah, Quincy, you don't have to move quite as far. So what was it about San Diego that made it the right fit for you?
Yeah, I think the one good thing about the free agency was that it kind of forced you to consider a lot of things and a lot of different choices. And I think one thing that weighed really heavy in my decision was how different teams are progressing and in what way. I think a big thing that we all kind of know and is glaring about the NWSL is has not always been the best situation for the players. And I think they're all trending in the right directions, most of the clubs. And even San Diego last year, I mean, they had a lot of changes and they had a lot of kind of new things. But I think the conversations that I had at San Diego, it really seemed like they wanted to put the players first and they were kind of taking a new step and putting their best foot forward in that way. And I think that they are progressing in a way that's very good and pretty quickly. So I think that was a really big reason why I wanted to choose San Diego. And also just like the way of living. I'm definitely someone who needs a lot of balance in my life. And so I think just not being too far from kind of the last 4 years that I've spent, not being too far from my family was something that like was pretty important to me.
Awesome. All right. Real quick before I let the two of you go, just I know that we've talked about, maybe needing to cook a little bit more, that the professionalism, but like what is the one thing that you are most excited for in joining the NWSL? Quincy, you can go first. We'll put you on the spot.
I think there's a lot of things. I think just the overall like professionalism in media is just like so cool to me. And that's just like a silly little thing. But I think I've watched all these different media sources and like all these different podcasts. I mean, even this one, and just being able to be a part of it, I think is like incredible. And I think just like meeting new people for sure. I mean, we've been with our UCLA teammates for 4 years, and the relationships we've been able to develop there have been so special. So I'm just excited to kind of open up a new avenue of different friends and different people to meet.
Awesome. All right. Lilly, take us out.
Yeah, I think for me, having a lot of friends who are in the league and then a bunch of idols and players that I've looked up to for so long, finding a lot of success in this league. I'm just excited and really honored. I think Quincy could say the same thing, to be a part of a league like this where it's growing so much each year, and they're constantly pushing the barriers, increasing visibility, just increasing the professionalism in this league. And I truly do think it is one of the best places to be and to develop as a player and person. And I'm just so excited to, learn from the players around me who have found so much success, kind of meet up with my friends and check in on them. When we play them, it's going to be so cool to travel around the country and just play at different stadiums where a lot of fans come out, and there's younger kids, kids that we used to be looking up at these players, to now be in this league playing on these fields against our idols, as I mentioned, is something I don't take lightly, and I'm so excited to be a part of. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to take us out. Thank you both so much for joining us. We can't wait to watch you in the NWSL. It's so wild to me that preseason is already right around the corner. The games are gonna start before we even know it, and yeah, we can't wait to watch you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. Appreciate it.
And now we're going to pivot to the agent side of things. Agents who are responsible for fostering conversations not only with players, but with clubs, not only in the NWSL, but all over the world. And so we decided to pick the brain of Executive Director of Inspired 11, the soccer agency, Gabriel Chapman. All right, we are joined by soccer agent and executive director of Inspired 11, Gabriel Chapman. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me, Tamerra.
Of course. Now, before we dive into the juicy bits of agenting, can you just sort of lay the groundwork for listeners who may not know exactly what the job entails? What do you do as a women's soccer agent?
Well, I think the biggest thing, the one that's the most obvious, is club placement. So we help identify players and then find them fits with clubs. That's the most obvious one. Depending on the agency, some that may be all they do, but then most agencies like our own, they may also help them with NIL, commercial partnerships. There's a lot of time spent on our end holding clubs accountable. So whatever's in a contract, if it's getting paid by a certain date, getting a bonus, et cetera, a car. So just making sure that they follow through on that sort of stuff. So those are some of the big things, negotiating contracts, placing players, and then making sure that the clubs follow through on their commitments to the players.
That's quite a lot of things to juggle. And now you have one more, which is that last year the NWSL announced that they would be eliminating the college draft. So my next question is, given that massive shift, how has the nature of your work changed when it comes to placing players into professional clubs?
So I would say one thing is very similar. One of the other things, that I didn't share in the last segment was a big part of our job is scouting as well and identifying players, and then, essentially having them come to the belief that we can be good partners with them. So that's a big thing. So identifying good players and signing good players is the same before as it is now. The best players are the ones that we get drafted. And now with no draft, those are the ones that have the best chance of getting contracts. So I think the biggest thing that is different, though, is that, and honestly, I think most of the changes are very advantageous for players. But the biggest thing is now there is full free agency for these players. I used to say, hey, you don't need an agent, but because if you were drafted, it was very, very simple. Your parents could help you through it. Most of the contracts in the NWSL the bulk, 90% of it can't be changed anyways. So it's very basic negotiation. But now even the best players are going to want an agent to help them leverage different opportunities. So the first rounders will have multiple opportunities. Your second, third, fourth rounders, maybe players that typically would have gotten a preseason invite. For them to have a chance of getting a contract, you really need someone that's connected to not just to a few clubs or can get connected to the club you get drafted from, but is able to speak to all 14 clubs. And if I can add one thing to that, again, the first rounders are going to be all set in both scenarios. They'll have more options in the new one. But the other thing that's crucial for the players a little bit farther down the pecking order is that someone like me needs to have relationships in Europe, in Canada, in the USL Super League, because you have to explore all those options. Unless, if you don't, then you risk your player ending up with a preseason invite and then maybe not getting a contract and having to wait to summer transfer window. So.
I'm really glad that you touched on that international aspect, because that was another question I had for you, actually, which is whether you see, especially for US-based players, that interest in taking their professional careers overseas. Do you see that changing, whether it's an increase in interest or a decrease in interest now that we are in a post-NWSL draft world?
Yes. So I would say most American women, there's obviously a lot of people from other countries who are in college soccer, but most Americans would love the opportunity, the vast majority would love the opportunity to stay in the United States. I think there's a realization that has taken place over the last year or two that the NWSL is the most competitive league in the world. So playing there is very difficult. I think women are accepting that. So they're looking at the USL Super League, which was very hard this winter because of the timing of the contracts. So I think the option of playing abroad has become a lot more attractive. I mean, you've seen Amir Ali and some of the, several NWSL players go abroad. Maybe Naomi Girma is going to be joining them soon. We'll see. But yeah. But I think it's an attractive option. And I think what I'm always telling players, you have to play at the very highest level you can. So if you can play in the NWSL, you absolutely should. But if not, go play on that next highest level. And what's great about somewhere, we probably shouldn't just put a whole blanket over Europe, but some of the better leagues there, you have an opportunity to learn a different way of thinking tactically. That's probably the biggest thing that Americans struggle in and need improvement in. They bring everything else to the table in terms of work rate, professionalism, attitude, never say die, mentality. But going over there, learning a little bit more tactically, technically, I think those are kind of things that can help you for the rest of your career. And a lot of these women also are able to play a lot, which is really what they need. Reps and seeing the pictures, over and over again in a professional environment, which really helps them develop. And I would throw one other thing in there too, which I think is so interesting, and I don't want to make too big of a deal about one issue, but or one example. Bella Simber, UNC starter, is just accepted a contract in the second division in Sweden. And I think probably if you said to a lot of women, hey, UNC starter is going to this league, it's a good league. But I think they would be like, whoa, it's a real realization about there are more opportunities than ever, but there are more players kind of than ever as well. In my opinion, there's more youth players. There's more pros staying in the game longer because there's better salaries. There's more competition from academies all over the world developing talent. So I just think it's really competitive, and that's kind of a little anecdote to kind of show where things are.
No, I love an anecdote, and I do think that that's reflective of exactly that level of competition and how saturated the market is now, which is a good problem to have. I'm curious how that saturation and that level of competition has changed sort of the nature of the conversations that you have with players now. I had a conversation recently with a coach that I will not name, but who made it to the College Cup, we'll say. And we were talking about how his approach to coaching has changed between the elimination of the draft and also the transfer portal. So I'm curious what that's sort of like from an agenting perspective. I imagine, as he said, that the conversations have to be a little bit less rosy. But yeah. I'm curious how it is for you.
Yeah, we really pride ourselves on trying to be honest with players, whether that's a player that we are hoping to sign or a current player. At the end of the day, you have to perform. And if I'm placing a player somewhere and they're not able to be successful, they don't have a good experience, and then the club's obviously it's not good for the club either. So we try to be very honest, and I think you do your best to provide anecdotes and some kind of information around it. So, you know, what is expected at a certain level. And to me, I'm always telling players, you've started at a certain level as a youth player, you're way up here, but now it's that last 1 to 5% that you need to get, which is going to make a difference from you being in the NWSL, starting in the NWSL, or being in a second division somewhere. So I think we try to talk about, hey, what's your max speed? Are you clean on the ball? What are some of your statistics looking like? Is it something related to the very specific position, you know, that you play that may have more of a supply than others? All those things go into it. We try to paint off the bat a picture for them, which they can accept or reject. But from our perspective, we want to promise that we're going to deliver X or Y. And so we have to have a pretty good hold on the different leagues and the players' qualities, and then try to tell them. I think I'm really excited because, you know, like we just had a client I just got the phone with who was at an NWSL preseason, but she was pretty sure that she needed to go to Europe. And that experience from being there was like, okay, I can hang here, but I don't see myself playing any minutes, you know, and I can see that now that I'm in the environment. So I think, back to your question about Europe, she's really embracing that because in her mind she's kind of been able to see it firsthand. But we try our best to communicate that. You know, not everybody can get that experience, but to communicate that. It's tough though, and if I can throw one thing in there, Tamerra.
Throw it.
We're in the trenches every day. I see what works and what doesn't work. I could tell someone that I think X and Y can happen, but at the end of the day I actually have to make that happen. So what happens a lot is there's college coaches, club coaches, friends saying, I talked to so-and-so at Houston Dash or whatever. They said that they like you. And that is always the biggest challenge probably. It's like, well, I should hold out and try to get that contract at Houston Dash. And I say, well, did your friends say they like you or they're ready to give you a contract? So it's like, because those are two different things. So, but I think as more, these things are all so new, as more data comes out and people can see friends and former teammates doing X and Y, then they can say, oh, okay, you know, I know her level. She went to Europe or she's playing in Canada or she's playing in the USL Super League. You can start to feel more comfortable with these different options and easier conversations.
I can totally see that. On top of the fact that as we're seeing this sort of internationalization of the NWSL going both ways, you know, I think that as those paths become more well-trodden, it sort of normalizes the possibilities for players and probably allows them to be even more honest and frank with themselves about their career paths.
Very well said.
I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Gabriel, one last rather meaty question for you before I let you go. I'm picking up the bookmark that we placed about sort of the timeline of this work to the extent possible, because I know every player and decision they make about where to take their careers will be different. But can you give us a general sense of the timeline from like those first conversations until they sign that contract? Because I know you mentioned the timeline sort of complicates things.
Yeah. If I can give you, I'll try just to get up on my soapbox just for a second.
Sure.
So there is a university that we ended up signing a player from. We always want to try to do things by the book. There is an agent form you need to fill out, and it says, please list your agent license. Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, other. So the agent rules, a lot of the eligibility rules are based around those sports that are primarily American. They have one entry point. They have a draft. There's a period between the end of the season and the draft. So I think we need to have a big rethink, because what happens, so we're very passionate about education. We try to speak with college teams and club teams. And my goal would be that every freshman gets to participate in one of our presentations about how the professional game works, questions you should ask agents. What's a contract look like? What's a transfer window? How much money will I make? Every freshman should know what those things are, so that by the time they graduate, they know how to make a good decision about an agent, or whether or not they should even think about going pro. That doesn't happen, though, today, even today, but definitely in the past. Many women are not having those conversations until November, December, right when they're graduating, trying to make sure all their classes are done, hopefully trying to win a national championship or a conference championship. Thinking about moving, the holidays, is too many things. So my advice to women, this is a gray area which all agents, I think, are trying to do their best to work within. And I've had a lot of college coaches ask me too, Gabriel, especially with no draft, how do we function in this? I believe in my heart of hearts, a woman needs to have an agent in September, maybe October. That'll give us time to pull together materials for them, to start having conversations with clubs. Because the thing is, a woman that's in NCAA is competing with women in Brazil, with women in Sweden, with women in Spain, all over the world. And those women are not constrained by those same rules. So 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old is probably in Sweden playing in the second division or playing in the top flight in the Damallsvenskan, and they have agents. So, and those agents are out working for them. So I think for American women or college players to have a level playing field, it's essential that they have someone there advocating for them early in the process, because a transfer window might open on January 1st, but the team will be built in July and August and September, October, and in the months leading up to January as well. But I think for women to have the best chance, it's the same thing. I always throw out this example. If you are a college engineering student, day one, you're coming in and there's career fairs and people helping you and telling you what a job looks like. And I just think we need to get a little closer to that for female soccer players.
That's a really good comparison, and probably one that will resonate with a lot of parent listeners, that academic aspect. Gabriel, I feel like I could ask you at least 17 more questions, because each of the answers you gave sprouted more questions, but I will let you go for now. I know it's a busy time. Thank you so much for joining the show, though. This was really educational.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tamerra.
All right, Meg, after hearing all these different perspectives from players, from agents, from general managers, I really appreciate that now we have sort of a filled in picture of what this post-draft world looks like. What stands out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main takeaway from every conversation, both on the show and just in general, the ones that I'm having across the league, are this is very much a brand new world, right? Everybody, I think, had really adjusted to the draft and the rhythms of the draft and what they needed to do in order to maximize the draft or, maximize trades around the draft. And that's not what's happening now. And I don't know if it's better or worse, but mostly it's different. Like, that's where we're at of, I don't know if what this offseason for 2024 into 2025 is going to look like what the offseason for 2025 into 2026 is going to look like. I really think there's going to be some kinks that get worked out between one year and the next. Like, this is the first iteration of this post-draft world, and I don't know if it's worked perfectly, but for the most part, I think everybody's adjusting.
I think so too, especially because, and this to me was one of the like resounding statements from both Lilly and Quincy, and Gabriel too, actually, is that ultimately this is great for the players. I mean, putting the agency and free agency, being able to have a little bit more control over your destiny is only going to be better for player welfare. It's only going to be better for clubs in the long run. I agree that this is a transitionary period. And like most transitions, they're going to be a little rough. There's going to be some kinks that need to be ironed out. But the fact that this decision is only going to open up possibilities for players can only mean good things for the game going forward.
Yeah, I think honestly everything really does favor the players of knowing that they can control where and pick what they want to prioritize too. And I think one of the things that we heard the most was playing time is really like the crucial thing, right? Like where are you going to get that playing time? And so what might actually kind of end up washing out is the teams that were lower on the table are going to need more bigger pieces right off the bat, right? Like Gotham or the Spirit or, you know, whoever it is might not need to add as many college kids to fill out that roster as a Houston or a Wave or all of these other teams. So in the end, we might kind of be washing out of where we would have been after a draft. But what I do think is really interesting, and the other piece that kind of has to be layered on top when you're thinking about this, is all these contracts now with the clubs have to be guaranteed. So what I think is getting lost in the shuffle a little bit right now is the teams that would maybe take a flyer on a kid in the 4th round and have that 4th round pick end up going on to like becoming a real standby player, right? Like I think the risk aversion for teams is going to be there because you've got to make sure that like you can't really waive someone if it doesn't work out or it's not the right culture fit or whatever it is. And so, but that's also maybe a good thing for the player too, of like, if you're signed, like you're certain of it. But it is like, again, there's just a lot of differences happening right at the moment. But I think, Tamerra, one of the other really big things that we need to get into too is that there have been some shortcuts happening for these signings, right?
Absolutely. I mean, even before the draft was eliminated, I think that anytime you are able to put youth national team on your resume as a young player, you are automatically catapulted into a top tier category that NWSL teams, which historically have not always been able to, have not necessarily been interested in investing substantially into their recruiting strategies, were able to just quickly go to, okay, who's getting invited to camps, who's playing in Youth World Cups. And then you factor in, a lot of times these players overlap, those who are playing at top legacy programs, the UNCs, the UCLAs, of course, the Florida States. Stanford, absolutely. And when you think about how easy it has been for not just NWSL teams, but professional teams generally to sort of pick from these pots, knowing that they have received the training that they would best be sort of like prepared to transition into the professional league through. I think that is going to continue, certainly. And it does beg the question of, I mean, I think of schools like Pitt, who has been pretty consistent. The Washington Spirit just recruited a Pitt player, Deborah Abiodun. It does raise questions about the fate of players from these, you know, not necessarily big name schools, but if you know that they're balling there. That's, I think, one of those questions that's going to remain to be seen over the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I think it is really just a matter of development. And also the other thing that we just have to track over a while is, you know, when are kids declaring, right, that they're going to make the leap for free agency, and can you go at 17? Can you go at 18 instead of waiting until all 4 years of college are done? And the opportunities, there's never really going to be a huge amount in the NWSL for some of these roster spots. 2 expansion teams coming in 2026, I think, will crack that door open a little bit wider for this. But I do think this is very much a, like, we can't really judge this one off season of, has this been a resounding success or not? Because, again, I think things are going to change, but it's also going to be a process that just develops with time.
100%. And this is, of course, happening in the midst of an NWSL that separate from that, is rapidly changing. It's expanding. I do think that at some point our conversations around academy systems and pipelines within the league are going to happen more frequently, and there's going to be more to discuss there. And all of those things, of course, are going to affect recruitment and that transition from NCAA, which in itself is also going to change as a result of the draft being eliminated. So lots of moving parts. Everything is sort of rolling forward, which means there's always going to be something to talk about.
I will say, though, just before we get out of here for the show, like, I don't think I missed the draft, the actual event. Like, there are fun parts of it, but from if you're attending as a media person, it is one of the most chaotic nights of the year, every single year. And like, yeah, it's cool because you get to like see everyone, and the draft was really good in terms of just getting everyone into a room, right? Like, I think the NWSL, they're doing that media day for the first time ever, which is going to be helpful, but it was coaches and general managers and rookies, and so you kind of had this ability to have a lot of conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I think NWSL needs to add winter meetings of some kind in addition to the media day that are available to media. But yeah, were you like a draft person? Like, some people were really into it. I was never one of them.
Yeah, to your point about the draft as like a meeting place, especially in the middle of the off season when you're not really seeing your people as like media, it was nice to catch up with people. It was nice to be able to have conversations with communications folks from various NWSL teams, get that initial FaceTime with the draftees. I have to say, though, from like an actual like draft perspective, attending them actually made me more critical of the existence of them, because they are so long.
Yes.
And they can be sometimes a little uncomfortable. I mean, we don't see the players who don't get to cross that stage.
Yeah.
But there are sometimes a lot of them, and it can be very emotional. It can be stressful for them. There are a lot of surprises, which sometimes they're good, sometimes maybe not so much.
I mean, you go back to that year where Sky Blue like couldn't land a draft pick, and they were out here making draft picks, and it was like, okay, because you're doing like, God. Yeah, there were always some sort of complicating fashion. I will say, best draft interview that ever happened, Midge Purse, like just a rock star from the minute she joined the NWSL. That it will always be my gold standard of what was the best part of a draft day.
New NWSL players heading maybe into media days. You've heard it. That's the new bar that you got to clear. Midge Purse. Good luck. All right. I need to make sure that you guys know that The Athletic recently partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free best-in-class coverage of women's sports. Everything, of course, from NWSL women's national team stuff, but of course, women's basketball, from college hoops to Unrivaled.
Unrivaled.
Are you guys watching Unrivaled?
It's so much fun.
Skylar Diggins-Smith.
I know, and I picked
Those
Lunar
buzzer
Owls
beaters.
like just very randomly based on pure aesthetics, and I feel
The team names.
so good.
So good, so creative. So, of course, if you want to read up on all of those things and more on women's sports, make sure that you're checking out sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. We got through it. These might be our final hours, Meg, before the big Naomi Girma to Chelsea moment.
I know.
Deep breaths.
We're getting there.
Deep breaths. We're getting there. Until then, I am Tamerra Griffin, alongside Meg Linehan, and you've been listening to Full Time with Meg Linehan. You can catch me somewhere I'm getting into cold plunges right now. If anyone else is getting into cold plunges, let me know.
I just have to step outside. That's my cold plunge.
Fair. In California, we have to do more extreme measures, but I will be doing those things on Blue Sky and Instagram.
All right. I'm Meg. You can also find me on Blue Sky and Instagram. If you've got thoughts about Naomi Girma, the NWSL schedule, the return to decision day, the end of the NWSL, whatever it is, you can always email us at fulltime@theathletic.com.
Full Time is not possible without our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. Thank you, as always, for listening, and we will be back with you next week on Thursday.